No one could forsake that Francis Ngannou, one of the biggest UFC stars, would leave the organization, but he did. His decision to leave took the world by surprise. And if one of the biggest pay-per-view draws is not being treated fairly, what could that mean for other lower-class fighters and for the future of the biggest MMA organization in the world? Francis Ngannou started his UFC career with a couple of wins in dominating fashion, which led to a huge popularity boost. Dana saw the potential in Francis and believed he was witnessing the rise of another UFC superstar. That was until UFC 220, where he faced Stipe Miocic. The Croatian-American outclassed the Cameroonian in a fight he was supposed to lose. This didn't sit well with the boss. Maybe you're asking yourselves, why is that? Well, from the start of the promotion of the fight, it was clear that Dana wanted Francis to win.
And Francis Ngannou has the world record for the most powerful punch. His punch is the equivalent to 96 horsepower, which is equal to getting hit by a Ford Escort going as fast as it can.
He just saw him as a bigger draw than Stipe. Francis was already named the champion by the media and the organization. Stipe thought otherwise. In fact, he was so furious that he didn't let Dana put the belt around his waist. Instead, he chose his coach to do it. This left Dana in a position in which he wasn't on terms with either fighter. Francis's first title fight was a disaster, but that wasn't the end. His next bout against Derrick Lewis was arguably the most boring and uneventful fight in the history of the UFC. Even though the fight was promoted as a clash of the two hardest punchers we ever laid eyes on, the bout saw no action. It was the biggest letdown in UFC's heavyweight history. In their combined 38 fights before their clash, only 5 of those fights went the distance. So it was fair to assume that this was going to be a great match, with Dana using every possible way to promote the fight. Once again, he was left with a sour taste in his mouth. To make things worse, Francis lost the fight. Fast forward 3 years after that loss, Francis racked up a couple of huge wins against the best heavyweight contenders, earning his second title shot. He beat the man who initially dominated him, Stipe Miocic, and he became the champ. He was finally becoming the superstar Dana wanted him to be. This was supposed to be the start of an incredible title-defending journey in which both Dana and Francis were going to make a lot of money. There was just one problem. Dana wanted Francis to defend the title as soon as possible, with that date being in August of 2021. The champ refused to fight so soon. He wasn't ready and was looking to fight in September. However, the boss had other plans. Instead of waiting a month, the UFC decided to put Ngannou on the shelf and slid in Ciryl Gane to fight Derrick Lewis for an interim title. I mean, him not fighting definitely wasn't the only reason Dana booked an interim title match. He hated the fact that Francis was publicly speaking about his dissatisfaction with the money. Francis felt as though he was not being fairly compensated for what he was accomplishing, and unlike many other fighters, he wasn't being silent about it. And the one thing Dana doesn't like is fighters publicly speaking about their dissatisfaction with the payouts. This resulted in a bad situation becoming worse that culminated after his interim championship win over Ciryl Gane, in which Dana wasn't present during the main event, showing clear disrespect towards the fighters, or at least towards Francis. All of the things mentioned previously had some effect on what was about to happen. The heavyweight champ, the baddest man on the planet, actually left the UFC. No more Francis Ngannou. Here's why.
First, I asked for a sponsorship. I have for health insurance, fighter advocate, somebody in the board meeting who will advocate for a fighter.
So, a fighter that a few years ago cared about nothing but winning and making money is now focused on improving the position of UFC fighters. This shows character development and genuine concern for the state of the sport in general. Still, an organization as big as the UFC refused to accept even one of his demands. Why were they willing to pay the champ huge amounts of money, but they weren't willing to get him health insurance? It's simple. One thing they like more than money is control. Let's say Dana agreed to Francis' demands. What would happen next? More and more fighters would want the same thing. They would want sponsorships, health insurance, more money, and so on. The UFC would not be in complete control, and they couldn't dictate the next move. However, the MMA world is not the same as it was a few years ago. The UFC is not the only option anymore. The rise of the sport in general resulted in numerous organizations not only being formed but established. Great payouts, filled-out arenas, and a solid roster. The UFC is still the biggest organization, but it's not the only dog in the yard. If the UFC continues its politics, we could see a rise in the departure of its fighters. For example, let's take a look at PFL. The winner of the organization's weight tournament won $1 million, which would mean 6 fighters received that kind of money. That's the same Francis earned in the title fight against Cyril Gane. Yes, they did win a couple of fights to get that amount of money, but considering the difference in popularity between the UFC and the PFL, it's easily determined that Francis was grossly underpaid. To broaden the horizon, other major sports leagues like the NBA, NFL, NHL, and MLB are all sharing their profit revenue at about 50% with its players, but the UFC is taking approximately 85%, while the fighters are left with measly 10 to 15%. The differential is actually crazy, and I'm not saying those sports organizations are running their businesses perfectly, but it's clear there's a different approach when it comes to making their athletes happy and satisfied. It seems as though the UFC is trying to purposefully destroy their relationships with the fighters. One other thing you got to keep in mind. Dana White is relying on a couple of fighters to bring in most of the profits, which leads to many fighters not getting a real chance to maximize their earning potential due to the lack of promotion. So, if you're not a global superstar, you're not getting the same treatment. This in a way makes sense, but constantly promoting the same fighters, while not giving a chance to some newcomers, could potentially reduce fan interest and could also make the process of bringing in new fight fans far more difficult. Also, why would a young, good fighter go to the UFC and receive absolutely zero promotion, just because he doesn't have a big personality, even though his skill set is off the charts? There are MMA leagues that primarily appreciate the actual fighting. But okay, at least they are treating their most valuable fighters fair. Well, no, they're not. Francis is the proof of that. So could his leave ruin the UFC? Not directly. But this could initiate a chain reaction of fighters leaving. The organization just doesn't care about its athletes, and if you ever try to get compensated fairly, you will only receive backlash for even thinking that. As though the UFC is saying, fuck you for not letting us control you. There are far more opportunities for the fighters, and those opportunities are just going to get better and bigger with time. Francis took the first step. He paved the way for other fighters who think the UFC is the only and final destination. He showed them that sometimes it's worth fighting for your principles. It's now time to see if anyone will follow that path.